Thank you very much for your very kind invitation. I'm very grateful and very excited to be here today. I see that there's many participants and very distinguished speakers, some of whom have greatly inspired me as well. I'll share my screen, and you had just mentioned about the new book, which is called Maya in the Bhagavata Purana, Human Suffering and Divine Play. This book is now available in India. So it was published by Oxford University Press, USA, and in the United States.
Prabhu, sorry, I cannot see your screen somehow. I don't know if it is problem with my screen. Now we can see. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay,
can you share again?
Yeah. Yes.
Still, yeah, with full screen I cannot see, but when you go to the other version.
Can you see it now?
Now I can see, yes. Yes.
Okay, yes. So this book was initially published by Oxford University Press, USA. In the USA, this book costs $100. So it's very expensive. But then Oxford University Press, the reception was good. The response was good. So Oxford University Press decided to publish it in India. So now it's available on Amazon.India, Amazon.in, and only for a much cheaper price. Very accessible, readily available. And this is a humble offering to all of you. I hope that you may find something of value for your own studies in science and religion. And I wanted to mention why I began with this topic on Maya. When I was a graduate student at Oxford University, then I started with this program in science and religion. And in this program, they look at science and the various religions in the world. And primarily, it's been a discussion between science and Christianity. Most of the books are on science and Christianity. And so I wanted to do something on science and Hinduism. So I asked my professors there, most of whom didn't know much about Hinduism, what I should do. And none of them could really tell me anything, what I should, study or work on. And so there was a professor by the name of John Polkinghorne, who was a professor at the University of Cambridge. And he, in the Western world, was the founder of the program in science and religion. So he started the first academic, systematic study of science and religion at Cambridge University. And it was the first university to start this among the Western universities. And he wrote one book in which he just touched upon science and the world's religions. And in that book, he talks about how science could interact with religions other than Christianity. And in the section of Hinduism, he mentioned that he felt that if science and Hinduism were to have a conversation, it would need to focus on the concept of Maya. Because Maya is something that is very essential to Eastern thought. Maya is the nature of the world. Maya, the world is often referred to as Maya. So if the world is Maya and science is studying the world, then naturally he thought, well, if an interaction between science and Hinduism is going to take place, we need to understand this concept of Maya. So initially I was thinking I'll do something on science and Maya for this reason. But then when I began looking at, well, what are some studies on Maya, I could not find anything that was, something substantial that was written on it. So first it was necessary to do a study on Maya itself. So therefore this book is Maya in the Bhagavata Purana. The Srimad Bhagavatam gives a very detailed, very extensive understanding of the concept of Maya. Maya is the world. Maya is the energy of God. and Maya is the human condition as well. Ultimately, Maya is the energy of God, and the energy of God, the energy of Krishna, forms this material world, which is the world of Maya, and it also forms the illusory, so to say, effects of this world. So in this book, I argue that how Maya puts us into illusion, but Maya itself is real. Maya is the creative energy of Bhagavan. Maya is the creative energy of God. And through his creative energy, that is Maya, the Lord creates both suffering and enjoyment for all living beings. So this is just a quick introduction on the book. And now I want to read a small excerpt on the Bhagavata Samkhya and how that relates with the self. So this is just a very short excerpt. I'll read from it, and in between, I'll make some comments, and then we can have some question and discussion. So I'll share my screen again here. This paper specifically explores the self's relation to material creation, concentrating on the Bhagavata Samkhya account of the manner in which Maya transforms into the various elements of the temporal phenomenal realm. In the course of this examination, we will attempt to compare the Bhagavata Samkhya system to that of classical Samkhya, specifically with regard to such standard Samkhya categories as Purusha, the individual self, Prakriti, the physical world, Ahankar, false identification, the Gunas, the qualitative energies, the 23 elements, and so on. However, before proceeding along these lines, it is necessary to highlight an important distinction between the Bhagavata Samkhya and that which is propounded in Samkhya texts such as Ishwar Krishna's Samkhya Karika. Familiarizing ourselves with this distinction should enable us to better comprehend the Bhagavata's understanding of self as we explore the various themes of this book. The distinguishing feature of the Bhagavata Samkhya system. It is beyond the scope of this section to engage in a lengthy comparison of the Bhagavata Samkhya and the Samkhya of classical texts. Furthermore, there will be no attempt to examine the respective arguments and counter-arguments concerning the existence of God. Rather, our more narrow aim is to present various Bhagavata passages indicating that this Purana views itself as a monotheistic as opposed to monistic or non-theistic text. Our aim, in other words, is to allow the Bhagavata to speak for itself on this issue, and for one important reason. The Bhagavata's conception of God is inextricably linked to its conception of Maya and how this energy functions in relation to both absolute, ever-existing, and temporal, flickering existence. Allowing the Bhagavata to speak for itself will thus enable us to more deeply comprehend the subject matter of this book. We can begin by noting that the classical Samkhya system, as enumerated in its most authoritative extant text, Ishwar Krishna's Samkhya Karika, covers such traditional topics as the theory of causation, the evolution of the world, the theory of knowledge, and the conception of liberation. However, the distinguishing feature of this and similar Samkhya works is their attempt to summarize all the Vaisheshika and Nyaya constituents of reality into two fundamental principles: Purusha, the conscious principle, and Prakriti, the unconscious principle, while entirely eliminating the third fundamental principle, which is Ishvara or God. Thus, classical Samkhya is often referred to as Nirishvara Samkhya or non-theistic Samkhya. The next few pages will consist of our attempt to distinguish Bhagavata Samkhya from the non-theistic Samkhya, by showing that while this work also recognizes Purusha and Prakriti as fundamental principles of reality, it also firmly and unequivocally embraces Ishvara, Krishna, Vishnu, Bhagavan as the Supreme Person who manifests, underlies, and directs all existences, including Purusha, Prakriti, and Maya herself. 1 minute. So the point being that the Bhagavata Samkhya is different from other Samkhya systems because the Bhagavata Samkhya is actually presenting a older theistic form of Samkhya, a form of Samkhya that is older than classical Samkhya. You also find this originally in the Mahabharata as well, and in the Bhagavatam, in which there's not just Purusha and Prakriti, but there's also Purusha, Prakriti, and Bhagavan. There's two Purushas, one the Supreme Purusha, and the second category is the individual Purushas. And then you have Prakriti. We can begin with key segments of the Bhagavata's first book, which describe the special instructions and meditational insights that brought Vyasadeva to the point of composing the Bhagavata Purana, both of which shed light on the theistic nature of this work. Motivated by feelings of goodwill and compassion toward the less fortunate persons of the present age, Kali Yuga, the Bhagavata describes Vyasa had divided the original Veda into 4 separate parts, had delineated knowledge of Brahman in the Vedanta Sutra, and had compiled the Puranas as well as the Mahabharata, which contains the monumental Bhagavad Gita. And yet, even after providing this tremendous gift to humanity at large, Vyasa was experiencing an inexplicable feeling of despondency, dissatisfaction, and incompleteness. Why? The answer comes from from Vyasa's own guru Narada, who arrives at Vyasa's hermitage, and he tells him that the reason why he's feeling this way is because he has not directly glorified the Supreme Lord. He has not directly glorified the Lord, and therefore Vyasadeva is feeling this inner emptiness because he's only indirectly described the ultimate truth, and so now Vyasa enters into a deep state of samadhi. In order to write the Bhagavata Purana, he needs to meditate upon the Lord. And as a result of this samadhi, he perceives 4 fundamental aspects of reality that form the basis of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. The first one is the complete person, the Purusha Purna, Krishna, Bhagavan. The second is the energy, Maya, belonging to and depending upon him. And the third is the individual selves, the Atma, that are deluded by Maya. And the fourth is the process of bhakti, by which those living beings, the Atmas, can reunite with that Supreme Being and their ultimate source. So Vyasadeva sees that there's these 4 fundamental things in this world. And he sees the interrelation between all 4 things. And after seeing this vision, he starts to write the Bhagavata Purana, which is the Satvata Samhita. It is the Samhita for those in the mode of goodness. It is for the great sages. And this book destroys all illusion, all confusions. And then he begins to describe the Lord and his energies. And this is where our discussion begins today, on the nature of the Lord's energies, of Bhagavan's energies, the nature of this world in relation to the self. With regard to these verses, the medieval Bhagavata commentator Sridhar Swami notes, this is stated, the Lord, who possesses all Shaktis, who knows everything, who has an eternally manifest, supremely blissful form, Swarupa, controls Maya by his knowledge Shakti, his Chit Shakti. The living entity is liberated through knowledge that is obtained by bhakti to the Lord. So the Lord possesses many, many Shaktis. And one of his Shaktis is his knowledge Shakti, and he controls the entire Prakriti and nature through this energy. The Bhagavata Purana identifies not two, as in classical Samkhya, but rather three fundamental aspects of reality: the Atma, the Self, the Maya or Prakriti, and Krishna or Ishvara. And with respect to the latter of these, the verses describing Vyasa's vision point toward Bhagavan Krishna as he who is the shelter of Maya, who is the origin, the knower and controller of everything, who is a complete eternal person and who can be known only through devotion. This understanding, moreover, is confirmed again and again, and in far more explicit terms throughout the Bhagavata's 12 books. So now, after understanding these three fundamental aspects of reality, the Atma, Maya, and Krishna, now we will proceed with our discussion of Bhagavata Samkhya. And we begin this discussion by looking at the Gunas. The Gunas are the key building blocks as described in Samkhya. The three Gunas are the key elements of this world. And we will make an effort to understand what these Gunas are, because as I described, Bhagavan or Krishna or Ishvara is the source of Maya. Maya is known as three guna. Maya is composed of the three gunas, and the Atma or the self is entangled in these gunas. So therefore, it is of utmost importance to understand what the gunas are in order to understand the Bhagavad Samkhya. And in order to understand the gunas and Samkhya, I will be making some connections with Western philosophy, particularly Aristotelian philosophy, to show that how the Samkhya philosophy is actually very relevant to contemporary philosophical discourse. The common reaction of some modern thinkers when encountering classical and other types of Samkhya is to dismiss such systems as remnants of a bygone era that have nothing useful to say about the metaphysical questions that philosophers grapple with in contemporary times. Here, to the contrary, and remembering that all forms of Samkhya regard the gunas as that which constitutes the perceivable world, we will attempt to draw a parallel between metaphysical discussions among Indic scholars regarding the nature of the gunas and those among Western philosophers regarding the nature of fundamental substances or elements. To do so, we will here and there weave into the discussion certain of Aristotle's views and conclusions. Both Aristotelian metaphysics and Bhagavata Samkhya metaphysics are concerned with the question of whether substances are fundamentally atoms, attributes, or powers. Both are concerned with the nature of universals and particulars. Both attempt to answer the question of what things ultimately are. And both proffer elaborate theories regarding the ontology of energies or powers. Here's our attempt to portray the question at hand, which has kept many philosophers up at night. Looking at a dining table, we ask, what exactly is it? Well, is it a functional object crafted from a tree's wood? What then is wood? Well, it is carbon material comprised of atoms. What then is an atom? Well, it is protons, neutrons, and at its smallest, electrons. What then is an electron? Well, it is a very small particle of matter with a negative charge of electricity that moves with great speed around the nucleus of an atom. At this point, we can legitimately say that while this answer may describe an electron, it says nothing about what an electron is. Beyond this, the response is generally silence, indicating that the electron is a fundamental piece of the world that cannot be further reduced or defined. And here lies the metaphysical conundrum. But how are Samkhya Gunas related to this quandary? So the question here essentially is, if I ask you, what is this table? You will say, this table is made of wood. Then I say, what is wood? You say, the wood is made of atoms. I say, what is atoms? Then you say, atoms are protons, neutrons, and electrons. I say, what is an electron? Well, you say an electron is an electron. It is a negatively charged particle that moves at a certain speed and that has a certain mass. I say, oh, these are just qualities that you're using to describe the electron. But what is the electron? What is it? You say, but I can only describe it using qualities. Why? Because it is a fundamentally irreducible piece of this world. You cannot reduce it any further. So this is called metaphysics. Physics is based upon metaphysics, which looks at what are the fundamental particles of this world. And now the Samkhya Gunas are dealing with similar metaphysical questions. Among scholars of Samkhya, there have been three dominant perspectives on the nature of the Gunas, with some regarding them as substances, some regarding them as qualities, and other regarding them as capacities. Now the Gunas, for those of you who may not know, they're defined as sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva means generally translated as goodness, rajas is passion, and tamas is ignorance. However, the Gunas are also described as the parts, the building blocks of this world. And in other places, they're described as qualities. And in other places, the Gunas are described as capacities, meaning that the Sattva Gun has the capacity of bringing knowledge. Rajas has the capacity of making a person angry. So it's described as substances, qualities, and capacities. And the Gunas are the most fundamental parts of this world. Just like we said in Western metaphysics, the atoms are the most fundamental parts of this world. So now the question is, well, what are they? How can we understand the Gunas and our relationship with these Gunas? Questions about the nature of the Gunas are questions about the fundamental constituents of the temporal realm, and thus they sit at the very heart of both Eastern and Western metaphysics. Throughout the years, scholars of Samkhya have engaged in vigorous polemics over this matter, often assuming that they must choose one among the above three views. In what follows, we review the strengths and weaknesses of each perspective, and then attempt to show that the Bhagavata's theistic Samkhya opts for a fourth alternative, one that is strikingly similar to Aristotle's perspective on the fundamental elements or constituents of the world. Classical Samkhya scholars such as Feuerstein and Das Gupta view the Gunas as substances, conceiving them to be the ultimate building blocks of material creation, the fundamental indivisible atoms, as in modern physics, that constitute everything that comprises the temporal realm. In this respect, Feuerstein and Das Gupta's writings present an interpretation of the Gunas that to some degree resembles austere nominalism, meaning that the Gunas are not seen as qualities or properties, but rather actual entities or reals. Thus, the gunas are thought to form the world ground itself. This particular interpretation, however, runs into its own difficulties. The conception that atoms are the ultimate constituents of the world can be found in the Vaisheshika doctrine of Paramanu. And while the classical Samkhya school does not deny the existence of atoms, Samkhya is particularly averse to the Vaisheshika view that atoms are the world's basic constituents. As such, Fiersten's use of an atomic metaphor to describe the gunas is problematic. Moreover, as Michael Burley has observed, the characteristics of the gunas given in both the Yoga Sutras and Ishwar Krishna Samkhya Karika do not sit well with the idea that the gunas are actual material entities. The Yoga Sutras describe sattva as illuminating, prakasha, rajas as activity, kriya, and tamas as steadiness or immovability, sthiti. While the Samkhya Karika describes sattva as light, laghu, and luminous, prakashaka, rajas as exciting, upashtambhaka, and mobile, chala, and tamas as heavy, guru, and enveloping, varanaka. Such descriptions may lead one to conclude that the gunas are not material particles, but rather properties, the second major understanding of the gunas found in classical Samkhya texts. So the idea that the gunas are actually like atoms, they're the actual substances of this world, is not tenable. So when the Bhagavata says, or the Samkhya Karikas or other Samkhya texts, when they say that everything in this world is made of the gunas, then these gunas are not referring to the atoms, because gunas are not described as such. The gunas are described more as properties. Perhaps. The second major understanding of the gunas found in the classical Samkhya texts. In this view, which has been embraced by such thinkers as Tuan Godrian, the gunas are conceived to be the colors, attributes, or qualities that constitute or form all material phenomena. A conception that calls to mind bundle theory, which asserts that objects consist of a collection or bundle of properties and nothing more. Put a bit more elaborately, bundle theory claims that the fundamental irreducible constituents of the world are qualities or properties, and that all complex concrete particles, all things of this world, are simply bundles of those qualities. As I described, the electron, ultimately you can only describe it by its qualities. Like the proponents of bundle theory, Godrian claims that all physical and mental phenomena are mere combinations of the qualities sattva, rajas, and tamas. Apart from these qualities and their combinations, there is nothing else. This particular understanding of the gunas, however, runs into the same difficulty as the bundle theory it resembles. The difficulty of accounting for the presence of an object's properties without invoking the existence of an underlying substance. So the problem here is that if we say that the gunas are simply qualities, then how is it that the gunas will manifest everything in material existence? Given this, the theory that the gunas are only attributes, colors, or qualities fails to explain what these attributes, colors, or qualities subsist upon. Put differently, if the gunas are the qualities, the combinations of which form all of material reality, how to account for the togetherness relations of these combinations? Is there an underlying substance that bundles these qualities to form concrete particles? And if so, what is its nature? A third interpretation has been proposed by Gerald Larson, who suggests that the gunas are capacities or processes. Sattva, rajas, and tamas are capable of causing the states of gladness, priti, perturbation, apriti, and stupefaction, vishada, respectively. Furthermore, Larson agrees with Radhakrishnan's assessment that sattva is the tendency to manifestation. Radhakrishnan defines sattva as a quality of manifestability, the capacity of a thing to become apparent or to contribute toward the becoming apparent of something else. Similarly, rajas is defined as the capacity to move or change, and tamas as the capacity to inhibit movement. The relation between the gunas is said to involve subjugation, support, generation, and intercourse. Larson considers the three gunas to be tripartite constituent processes that manifest the world with all its variety. Larson's understanding, however, appears to be incomplete. This is also incomplete in that it fails to explain the ontological status of the gunas. What is a capacity or process? Moreover, Larson's view of the gunas as processes or capacities runs into the same difficulty as the view that they are qualities, colors, or attributes. If the gunas are supposed to constitute everything, but the gunas are only processes, what is the stuff that the gunas process? Let us here digress a bit to discuss the views of Aristotelian philosophers on this subject. In addition to defining the ontological structure of substances, Aristotelians endeavor to define what these substances are. Aristotle believed that substances are powers that manifest certain properties. So we've seen the three different options of what the gunas are. They're either substances, attributes, or qualities, or capacities. They're either substances, qualities, or capacities. All three are not satisfying. And so we will see then how does the Bhagavata describe what the gunas are. But before we do that, we are looking at some of Aristotelian philosophy that says Aristotle believed that substances are powers, that these fundamental irreducible substances are actually powers that manifest certain properties. In Greek, dunamis means strength or power, as well as ability or faculty. The abilities to heat, crush, or sing are examples of powers. It is plain that of the things that are thought to be substances, Aristotle writes, most are powers, earth and fire and air. Fire, for example, would be a power that burns and heats and has the tendency to rise. Aristotle believed that a thing and its essence are inseparable. And since the essence of fire is to burn and heat, fire is a power. Charlotte Witt explains, we say that fire has the power to heat other substances, and we think that it has the power whether or not it is actually heating anything. We also speak of a person's abilities, like the ability to play the viola or to speak French. One way to think about the powers or abilities of substances is as dispositional properties, which are exercised in certain circumstances but not in others. We can contrast the dispositional properties of a substance with its categorical properties, like height or weight. Since substances like animals or plants have both dispositional and categorical properties, it seems uncontroversial that powers and abilities exist. So I have the power to move my hand. I may not move my hand, but I have the power to move my hand. So when there's a dispositional property, that is called a power or an energy. Aristotle also considered powers to be not only rational or non-rational, but also causal and consisting of two states of being, potential inactive and actual active. The power to see exists potentially, when a person's eyelids are shut, and actually when they are open. Similarly, a person has the power to go to the store or the park or the library, but that power exists potentially while the person is asleep. Charlotte Witt notes that by establishing a distinction between potentiality and actuality, Aristotle places his theory of powers in a teleological framework. Potentiality and actuality are relational terms in Aristotle because something that exists potentially only does so in relation to existing actually. Now we come to what I consider to be the Bhagavata's uniqueness in adopting an interpretation that differs from the three that have been thus far proffered, but that is strikingly similar to Aristotle's view as presented above. So I will now show that how the Bhagavata's conception of the Gunas is similar to what Aristotle is mentioning here. Aristotelian metaphysics is the most commonly metaphysical theory accepted by physicists and scientists today. Like Aristotle, Bhagavata Samkhya identifies the Gunas not as substances, properties, or processes, but rather as potencies, energies, or powers, being transformations of Maya or Maya Shakti, which operates under the direction of Krishna, the origin of all energies and their transformations. So, like we saw Vyasa's vision, Vyasa saw Bhagavan, the Atmas, the souls, and Bhagavan Shakti. These three things, these three fundamental ontological realities. So the Gunas are produced of Maya, and Maya is a Shakti, Maya Shakti. So therefore the Gunas, according to the Bhagavata's ontology, are also Shaktis. They're also powers. From that one Shakti of Maya, it divides into three, which becomes the three Gunas. And these Gunas are energies or powers that manifest all the other things in this world, all the other manifestations in this world. Now we may think, oh, this is mythology and this and that. But in this world, like we saw, Aristotle was mentioning, in this world, we do find many things that exhibit powers. Like fire, for example, fire has the power to heat. Fire heats things, it makes them hot. So one cannot say that there's nothing, fire is not an energy, because it has the capacity or the power to heat things. It also has the power to illuminate. Similarly, we have different powers. We have the power to speak, the power to smell, to eat. These are also powers. So in this world, there are things called powers or energies. People have the power to do things. Similarly, the Gunas are fundamentally energies or powers. They are transformations of Maya that further transform into all of the different varieties of things in this world. The things of this world are made of a combination of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Being transformations of Maya or Maya Shakti, which operates under the direction of Krishna, the origin of all energies and their transformations. Moreover, like Aristotle, the Bhagavata views the Gunas as existing both potentially and actually. Prakriti is that state in which the Gunas are inactive and unmanifest, avyakta, existing only in potentialities. So the Bhagavata describes that initially there's pradhana or just prakriti. The Gunas have not been active. This is in the unmanifest state. And then when creation begins, that avyakta, that pradhana, then becomes manifest. So number two, those potentialities are actualized when, by Krishna's will, Prakriti comes in touch with the Purushas, the conscious individual selves, upon which the temporal realm manifests, transforming into the 23 subtle and gross elements. By establishing a distinction between potentiality and actuality, the Bhagavata places its theories of energies in a teleological framework as does Aristotle in speaking about powers.
Sorry, Prabhu, to interrupt. A couple of more minutes.
Yes, I'm actually at the end, just 2 more paragraphs here.
Thank you.
Now, connecting this with the self in the Bhagavata posits that there's a fundamental qualitative difference between temporary material forms and beginningless non-material forms. In this view, the absolute realm consists of eternal conscious forms that are irreducible in nature. So just like we said, there's material particles that are irreducible, and the gunas are irreducible, fundamental powers of this world. Similarly, the Atma is also an irreducible particle. It is irreducible in its own nature. Forms that are irreducible in nature, conscious forms that are individual, personal, and beginningless, like the original supreme form of Krishna, God. So Bhagavan is also irreducible. God cannot be divided into certain parts. In the same way, each of our individual Atmas, Krishna says in the Gita, is unbreakable, insoluble. Every Atma is also a fundamental, irreducible particle. It was established that the Bhagavata conceives of the absolute truth as a complete person who possesses all the faculties and features that one normally associates with personhood, and yet who exists perpetually beyond the realm of temporary material form in his own eternal non-material abode. But what of the minute eternal selves that emanate from the Supreme Person, like ray particles emanating from the sun? Bhagavata commentators have noted that as a drop of sea water contains the same chemical composition as the sea itself, so do the minute eternal selves contain the same fundamental nature as God himself. In other words, according to the Bhagavata, the transcendental form of the eternal self, which includes intelligence, senses, and the ability to perceive, is nothing like the form of matter that is constructed of the 23 elements of the Samkhya system. It is not the glove, it is the hand. It is not the reflection, it is the reflected. It is not the temporary physical encasing. It is the fully free and liberated self, the very form of consciousness. For now, to shed a bit more light on a difficult topic, we can also view the non-material self, the Atma, as a simple entity, a fundamental, irreducible, complex particle, similar to Aristotle's concept of a kind. A kind of thing is a fundamental thing that is just a kind of its own thing. In this view, despite the fact that the non-material self possesses attributes such as formness, consciousness, intelligence, mind, and senses, that self is an irreducible complex substance, a simple entity, consisting only of Vishuddha Sattva. In contrast, the non-material self's temporary physical body has no unified existence. Rather, it is a complex particle consisting of a bundle of at least 23 elements comprising of the 3 gunas. In other words, while the eternal non-material form is an irreducible substance that manifests certain properties, the temporal physical body, a machine made of matter, can be reduced to its constituent parts, a primary project of the physical sciences. So the Atma, therefore, is the self, because the Atma cannot be broken down into smaller parts. But the body has so many different parts, and it can be reduced to its constituent parts. And each one of its parts, the electrons, neutrons, and protons, we clearly know that they don't have life. There's no life in them. And so therefore, those individual parts cannot be us. And because those parts are not us, then the Atma, the self, that is us. That is the irreducible self. That is the person. So the soul exists as this simple entity with Shakti, with powers to do certain things. And it exists in relation to, it is different from the Gunas, which are also fundamental material entities which comprise this material world. So once again, we have the Lord, we have Krishna, God, then we have his energy, which is Maya, which turns into the three gunas. And the third fundamental category is the individual living entities, the individual selves, who are eternal, irreducible spiritual particles, who are either entangled in this material creation or they are liberated from this material creation. So I'll stop at this point. My time is now concluded. And if there's any comments, discussion, questions.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. We have many questions in the chat box, but I think we can take a couple of. The first question comes from Kunal Lakhera. The question is how to determine our guna and act in this materialistic world with that, and where guna exists in our subtle body with mind, intelligence, and false ego, or with soul.
It's a very nice question. As I was describing, and this is why the science of the gunas is so important, the gunas are everywhere. All of this whole material nature is comprised of the gunas. And we are beyond the gunas. The self, the soul is beyond the gunas, but the body is also composed of the three gunas. Now, the gunas as powers, they manifest many different qualities. So this physical body is composed of certain gunas due to which it is solid and it's not liquid. So those gunas you cannot change. The physical body is always going to be the physical body. But the effects of the gunas, meaning that the potentiality of the gunas, whether I want this body to do good or I want to do bad, whether this body should be engaged in sattva, rajas, or tamas, that is up to us. And that can be determined by the sangha, or the association that we keep. So if this body associates with primarily tamas, meaning we go at night to the bars and we are watching bad movies, and we associate with the mode of tamas, then tamas will affect us the most. If we are up early in the morning, we are doing meditation, we are in a spiritual atmosphere, then the guna of sattva will affect us the most. And so therefore, we can understand our gunas based upon the sangha, or the association that we keep. Because everything in this world has gunas, and these gunas will affect us. So our choice is simply which gunas we want to choose.
Thank you, Prabhu. And the next, I think, complementary question is how the gunas are affecting to non-living entities of the world. Are the gunas there? It's from Vaishali. So how gunas are affecting non-living entities in the world?
Non-living entities?
Yeah.
How are they affecting the gunas are affecting all the living entities. Every living entity is being affected by the gunas. So for example, in the form of a tiger or lion, the guna of rajas is most prominent. A tiger is very passionate. He eats a lot. He wants to be the king of the jungle. He's very, very passionate. Whereas in the form of a snake, the guna of tamas is most prominent. In the human form of life, the guna of sattva should be most prominent. But if we become animalistic, then the gunas of rajas and tamas will become more prominent.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Next question is from Jyoti Ranjan Prabhu. What is the difference between Prakriti and Maya? How does potentiality and rationality in the context of Maya or matter, both manifested and unmanifested, relate to Achinta as presented in Bhagavatam?
Nice. So actually the Bhagavatam is connecting Prakriti with Maya. So Prakriti is like Samkhya, right? Samkhya says Prakriti and Purusha. And Maya is Vedanta. Vedanta talks about Maya and the Atma. What the Bhagavatam does, it connects Vedanta with Samkhya. It gives us the complete picture. It says that Prakriti is produced from Maya, or rather Maya Shakti manifests as Prakriti. And this Prakriti has 3 gunas. Maya also has 3 gunas. Maya is Gunamayi. Maya is composed of the gunas. And so Prakriti, Maya and the gunas are all Shaktis. But when we speak of Maya, Maya means the energy of Bhagavan. When Vyasa has his vision, he sees Bhagavan, he sees his Maya, and he sees the Atma. So the most fundamental energy is Maya, and then Maya manifests as Prakriti and the gunas. So Prakriti is essentially the manifestation of Maya.
Perhaps one last question. Do you consider, this is from Abhiranjan, do you consider Maya as a form of energy or illusion with potential to bring change? If illusion, how can it bring reality in scientific sense?
So this is the point I was mentioning in the beginning, that Maya itself is not illusion. Maya is very real. Maya is the energy of God. It is the Shakti of the Lord. It is power. And this power manifests the world, right? All this whole material world is manifest by this power. And then one of the effects of this power is that it puts us into illusion. So Maya may put us into illusion. Just like fire lights and also heats, right? It does both. So it has different things. So similarly, Maya produces the world, but Maya's effect, another effect, is that it puts us into illusion. Now, our choice is to become dazzled by this Maya, or to rise above this Maya through knowledge. Through, as we read, that Maya is under the Lord's Chit Shakti, his knowledge potency. So if we take to spiritual knowledge, we can overcome this Maya. We can transcend this Maya.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I think we are about there. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. And I hope to see you. If you want to stay, you can stay. I know it's late, almost 11:30 there.